Hi folks, it's Smitty. It is 1 August 2020, and if you hear any meowing, it's because Buster wants another dog treat. Buster is our oldest orange kitty, right there, not to be confused with Miss Katie, who's an entirely different creature.
Watch it.
But what game do you have for us today?
Stalingrad 42.
And were we ever supposed to go to Stalingrad?
No.
Well, remember when we were going to go on our first river cruise, we thought about going up the Volga.
True.
But the little green men started doing stuff in the Donbass region, and that deep sixed that. So we ended up going to...
We went up the Dnieper.
We went up the Dnieper.
Yep.
And so does that look like the Ukraine to you?
Well, most of what I remember from our cruise was going through Odessa and Kiev. I don't remember the countryside as well as Smitty does.
Do you remember, though, all the sunflowers?
The sunflowers were beautiful.
We saw lots of sunflowers, and of course we know I like anything on Stalingrad, and you like the movie Stalingrad, where they were. Remember when they're crossing the river and the Stukas come down and hit a lot of the ships?
I like Stukas.
And you like Stukas. So, but it's a new game. We kind of got some shine on it today because it's one of those shiny days. So, but as always, we thank Miss Katie for her help. Bye-bye. Hi, folks. It's Smitty. If you were one of my Air Force students, I'd be Dr. Smith or Doc, but it's your other favorite military historian who actually really plays the games that he talks about. Today, we have, ta-da, Stalingrad 42. We were to go to Stalingrad as an anniversary present to ourselves, and the little green men started in the Donbass in 2014, and well, that kind of kiboshed that trip, although today wouldn't be Stalingrad, it's Volga, but we were to go there. Didn't happen, but we did get to see other Soviet memorial sites. But we are talking about Stalingrad 42, and right now, we are deep in the summer of 42 as the German army is sort of milling around in the Ukraine trying to decide what it's going to do. Not so much because the German army doesn't know what to do, but because there are conflicts at the higher headquarters as to who is going where. Who's going to Stalingrad and who's going to the Caucasus. So that turns into a great gaming scenario. But let's talk about the game right now. For our poor buddy Sam K, we only have one baggie with 2 dice in it. Now, red dice for the Soviets and gray dice for the Germans. We have, I think if I recall here, 4 scenario cards. Correction, we have 5 scenario cards. We have the Uranus one, which is then the Soviet counteroffensive. We have the campaign game and fall blouse scenario, which is the German movement. We have the Caucasus Campaign, German campaign card and fall blouse. We have the Caucasus Campaign turn record track and reinforcement display. We then have the Uranus turn record track and reinforcement display. We then have the Caucasus Campaign for the Soviets. We then have the campaign game and fall blouse scenario for the Soviets. Well, we have 2 of those. So why do we have 2 of those? Well, we do. So I'll have to look at this to see why we have those. And of course, we have the Uranus scenario again. And as always, the thing that everybody wants to know is the combat record table, combat results table, and then of course the terrain effects chart, because it's hard to move across the board without knowing what the costs are and the impact on defense and all. What is probably the one that is the worst? Mountains, because mechanized units take, well, 4 movement points to go through the mountains in the Caucasus. Not good. There are 3 counter sheets. Easy to read, course, we've got your Romanians, your Italians, and of course your Germans, and supply trucks. We've got, it looks like the counters are, well, it's a little hard to tell what those tanks are. So I'm not certain looking at those right off, and that says something. But 3 counter sheets, of course, lots of Soviets. Now we've got some T-26s on there, and we have the Lee Grant. Oh, I love the Lee Grant. And some more Soviets, and mainly markers. And as I count up here, there are, I think, 192 counters per sheet, and that comes out to 192 times 3 is 576, I think. Interesting that we have 4 or 8 in a block, 8 here, so 8 rather than the normal 10, which makes the counters look a little bigger. I don't know if they are or aren't. And now, do you think 576 counters are going to fit in this? Miss Katie is shaking her head no. And I'm thinking, well, let's look how deep it is. It is as deep as there on my little finger. Ooh, I don't think so. But it does fit nice and snug. Doesn't take up much space that way, but I'm dubious as to 576 counters for there. There are 2 large map sheets and 2 smaller map sheets. I will hold those up for you real quick. They will probably be glary, but of course I will be looking at them independently and separately then on my own. We first have, starting from Stalino to Rostov to Voronezh in the north. We have the first one here. Ta-da-da. That's map number 1, with all sorts of good tracks on the side. Typical GMT, nice, bright, colorful, easy to read, and useful. So that's map number 1. Map number 2, of course, since it's the big map, other big map, we go from Saratov in the north, down to Stalingrad, and the deserts. The 2 smaller maps both go into the Caucasus regions. And folks, if you're thinking what I'm thinking, if you're not thinking what I'm thinking, I'd be surprised. This is a game that truly called out for, what did I say, Miss Katie? Mounted maps. And I was kvetching about it to her that, oh, this should have been a mounted mapping. And of course here you've got a rough approximation of what the Caucasus maps look like. And GMT did a game on the Caucasus Campaign, which I can heartily recommend. That it is an excellent little game. It's a campaign that, well, everybody likes to talk about the sexiness of Stalingrad for some reason. The Caucasus Campaign is probably more important because that's where Germany was either going to win or lose World War II if they got the economic resources, and of course they did, and they failed. Now, as always, what do we talk about next, Miss Katie? What are these things called?
Books.
Books. We have lots of books. First, there is the trilogy. This is volume 1 of 3 by David Glantz. This is to the gates of Stalingrad. This goes from April to what, August 1942. There's actually a 4th book now. And the 4th book is more a companion book of resource material, facts, and figures. So it's a trilogy plus 1. Figure out how you call that. Then there is the Stalingrad Cauldron by Frank Ellis. I reviewed this for someone, but I don't recall who published my review of it anymore. But the University Press in Kansas sent it to me. I happen to like Ellis a great deal as a historian. He's got a good, different feel for the East Front, He's a new and fresh face in the East Front historiography sense, and he's worth your time. Then, armor. Our good friends at Armor Magazine said, well, Colonel Smith, could you retire? Since you know you're retired, and now you're just only Dr. Smith, could you review this for us? This is probably the best single volume work on Stalingrad. If you want a good book on Stalingrad, only one book, get this one. You can look up my review on the internet, go to Armor Magazine, type in Dr. Smith and Stalingrad, and you'll eventually find it. It's a recent one in the last 3-4 years. But as always, we thank GMT for sending us the game. We thank Tony Curtis for his service to the Air Force, because Tony is one of the people who helped see that I get the game. So, as always, we thank all. Okay, folks, let's talk about the maps. Tell me if this constitutes, in your mind, a mini monster. 2 large maps, a small map. There's a lot of map here. And what always matters to many of us is how well do the seams fit together. Well, the seams fit very nicely together. Considering I just have them kind of out here like this, things match up very well. Very good, very nice job with that. And you know, I really love the way they do certain kind of things, at least on their East Front maps, like the way a city looks, how bright it is with the point, great colors. Here we've got a turn record chart. And of course, what units come in and axis markers. So, and we've got Buster to help us. Buster usually doesn't come help us. So we'll move Buster along. And Buster is moving along his own. He's left the area. But tell me you don't like this map. Oh, and of course, the Volga in Stalingrad. What's interesting is the terrain is fairly flat out here. And at this scale it would need to be. But there were more gullies out to this area than the map would indicate. But again, it's a matter of scale. So it's scalability in that sense. Now, combat result chart. Not your kind of DE type, but more, although we do have A1s and D1s. But you kind of gotta like this. This sort of modification here. And of course, the same thing much of the system has had, the determined defense table. It took me a while to get the hang of that in a previous game. Terrain effects chart, and as I noted earlier, alpine and mountain is hard. Rivers. Rivers matter a lot because the Germans had trouble at times with the rivers. Then we've got lots of these. We've got lots of the scenarios. Of course, that was for Uranus. Campaign game and Fall Blau. Then we've got solely for the Caucasus Campaign, if you just want to play that. And personally, I find the Caucasus Campaign very fascinating. You have the Caucasus Campaign turn record, as we talked about earlier, and reinforcement display for both sides. And you look, as it goes on, the preponderance of reinforcements solely becomes Soviet. The German Caucasus Campaign. And if you look, There's a lot of German armor there. We've got three more panzer units that come down, and we've got all sorts of associated small guys. That was critical for the Germans, and they had fuel issues the whole time. The German Uranus scenarios start. Lots of Italians, lots of Hungarians on the board, and of course the campaign game and all. Then we've got, as I said, we've got the counterboard, not the counterboard, correction, the holding box for counters, and let's look at the counters now. Gotta love the way they do mountains and snow. It's stunning. Counter sheet number 3. Markers and some Soviet units. Not terribly exciting to have the markers, is it? But now we have the Soviets. This would be a different Soviet army than, say, that was in the Dark Valley. Bit stronger, bit better defense, more punch. The German is still a deadly foe, but the infantry isn't maybe as good. And what we start to see now, we start to get these remnant units. I like the fact that these, and we mentioned earlier, the supply trucks. And if you played War in Europe, you remember the supply trucks trying to do other things. And then we've got von Manstein, of course. So, there you have it. We'll see how this one plays in short order, but we've got some other games to play in front of it yet. As always, we thank GMP for sending us this game, and we look forward to playing this. Thanks. Bye.